Welcome to Priestess Initiations, the Goddess Coven. I'm Casey Dunn, educator, priestess, and professional somatic therapist. In April 2025, I went through a priestess initiation of old and launched the Priestess Initiations podcast 6 months later. Whatever brought you here today, I invite you to drop into the spiral with me. Let's begin. Welcome back to Priestess Initiations. I'm Casey. Last week we talked about Hestia, the keeper of the sacred flame, about what it means to tend your own inner fire before you tend anything else, about sustainable transformation that doesn't burn you out, but burns through you. And today we're going much further into that, because here's the thing about the sacred flame. It needs a witness. Someone who can sit beside your fire without trying to control it, redirect it, or put it out. Someone who can hold space for your becoming without making it about them. That's what we're talking about today, the king archetype, the divine masculine as witness, the partner who can be sovereign and in relationship, the one who can hold the container while you burn. I've invited my partner Matt to have this conversation with me. Not because he's mastered this, but because he's actively living it. He's in the tender, demanding work of the boy to king journey, and he's willing to be honest about that on a podcast with me, which frankly is its own act of king energy. He's finishing his master's degree in counseling. He's met all the requirements. We're just waiting on the paperwork now. And he's been my witness through some of the hardest initiations of my life. In today's episode, he's bringing an IFS psychology lens, that stands for internal family systems, and we'll get to that in a minute, to this conversation that I think you're going to love. Matt, welcome.
Hello, everyone.
So before we dive in, I want to talk about what's happening in the sky this week, because the astrology is almost embarrassingly on point for this conversation. We are building toward a full moon in Libra on Wednesday, April 1st. And Libra is the sign of partnership, of the sacred other, of balance, and of the art of relating. This moon is sitting on the Aries-Libra axis, which is the axis of self and other. Where do I end and you begin? How do I stay fully myself inside of a relationship? And right at the opening of this week, Venus, our planet of love, desire, worth, and beauty, aka Aphrodite, moves home into Taurus. Venus in Taurus is the lover who knows her own body, who doesn't rush, who understands that real love is slow, embodied, and rooted in the earth. That's the queen archetype, and we talked about that toward the end of season 1. Go back if you haven't. And the king energy we're discussing today, the witness, the container, it has the same quality. It's not flashy. It's not performing. It's present. But by Friday, Venus meets a square from Pluto. And Pluto, aka Hades, is death, transformation, the underworld. And Pluto always asks, what are you willing to let die so something can be born? And when we're talking about love, it's usually like, what outdated versions, what outdated beliefs are you willing to let die so that the real thing, so that more authentic love can thrive? That's the thread we're pulling this whole week. What does it cost you to stay yourself inside of love? What does it cost you to stop abandoning your own center in service of harmony? The full moon in Libra says that the answer to sacred partnership isn't losing yourself in another person. It's becoming so rooted in yourself that you can actually be fully present with them. That's the queen energy we discussed in season 1, and it's also the king. And that's what we're talking about today.
Well, I think it's also really important to point out that our lamp is in retrograde.
The lamp's in retrograde?
Our lamp is in retrograde.
What does that mean?
Did they know about the lamp?
No.
Yeah, so
Tell our audience about the lamp, honey.
Well, I think it comes from moments, Casey, when you can get really upset about astrology, and I'm all for astrology. I think that we get to choose like our own destiny in the midst of whatever the stars or our lamp are doing. So one night when you were upset about our relationship or something bad was going to happen because of Mercury, I was like, well, our lamp actually has more of an electromagnetic impact on us than Mercury, so I think we're okay. But it's not that I don't support you in astrology. It's just like I like to say that because I think I guess kind of what you're talking about too is like bringing that groundedness in. Or maybe I'm just being it. On your show. I don't know.
I mean, I think it's part of it. It's definitely a thing. I mean, I might have mentioned the lamp in that episode where I talked about claiming your sovereignty, about deciding what you want to take with you, right? And what you want to take from the stars. And there's no negative astrology, but we all have our moments. And all of mine happen to come in luteal.
When our lamp is in retrograde.
Which is AKA when the lamp is in retrograde. The lamp's in retrograde when I'm in luteal. So before we get to the king archetype, I wanted to talk about the psychological framework that's been guiding your journey and kind of give a basis for the audience. I've talked a lot about Jungian archetypes, so they're used to some form of parts work, but you work with more internal family systems as a lens, aka IFS, which is a parts-based therapy model. Can you explain a little bit about what that is for people who aren't familiar?
Well, I'm not really trained in IFS. I guess I'm more of like a audiobook couch IFS therapist. I've listened to a lot of podcasts. But I think it's all like parts work is all related. And I think, Dick Schwartz, No Bad Parts. I really like his framework on it, but it's just, parts are the same, whether it's Gestalt or IFS. But I think the basic idea is that we all have different parts of ourselves. And these could be like if you've ever had an argument with yourself, of one part of you wants to stay home and one part of you wants to go out and party, and then you're almost noticed as like internal arguments. I think we also have these little sub neural networks of different parts of our lives or different sub personalities. Like maybe you'll notice sometimes you feel like you're 7 years old again, or sometimes maybe an old friend will bring out a part of you hadn't experienced in a long time. So I think there's kind of like there's actually a lot of cool neuroscience to back that up of we have different sub-personalities in our brains. And also I think there's like a spiritual component of like there's different parts of our soul, or perhaps different just pieces of who we are.
That reads a lot of books.
Yeah, I'm very nerdy and sciencey. Where Casey, you're very spiritual, so I just thought it was interesting how that would mix on your podcast.
Yeah, we'll see. I bring science in sometimes, but I think that's a balance too, and that's actually very classic when we're talking about masculine and feminine energies, in a way, in what we're holding. Yeah, and so with IFS and this framework, bringing in the king as an archetype. So how do you feel like parts work relates to the king archetype? Do you think the king is a part, or is it self energy?
I don't know. I think that's a hard question. I guess like it just depends on the person. I think for myself, like it's like when all of my parts are working together, so maybe, and I guess if people aren't as familiar with IFS, self is kind of, the idea is that we all have this whole complete self that's kind of the witness behind all of our different parts. So if our parts tend to be, trauma or experience based, self is like this compassionate awareness. So I guess for myself, being a king, it's like kind of a choice of stepping into like who I know my high self to be, but also it's like all of these individual parts like working together too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense when we talked about queen, I always talk about the spiral, like the maiden to mother spiral and this choice of sovereignty. And so there's that piece. And they're really different in what you're choosing. You're kind of choosing to be the witness. And I'm choosing to be in my sovereignty. It's kind of like their opposite journeys in a way.
Yeah. And I think we all have maybe natural tendencies. Like, I don't gravitate towards being a queen. Well, maybe I could, if I wanted to, but I think, we tend to naturally embody different archetypes, but also it's a choice, right? And I think maybe we all kind of have like a highest version of our specific embodied selves.
Yeah. So what your highest self is might be a little bit different for everyone. Can we talk about your journey a little bit from boy to king? And I'm curious too, if you feel like there's a stage in between, like the knight, the warrior, something that's not boy anymore, but not quite king yet.
Yeah, I definitely don't feel like I'm king. Maybe, I don't know. Like, I think there's times when I embody that energy, but I definitely don't feel totally there. I don't know. I think one important distinction is like, just because you can embody your highest self, that doesn't mean that like, I'll always have a part that's like a young boy, or that feels tender, or that wants freedom, or doesn't want responsibility, or struggles. Like, it's all these different parts of me that are there. Like, I don't think that the king is about getting rid of other parts of yourself. And I think there are different stages. Like, maybe there is kind of an in-between, or whatever you want to call that. Maybe knight, jack.
Well, in the tarot, it would be the knight, right?
Yeah.
Which is fun. We pulled the Knight of Swords.
Totally.
Recently.
Was it jack and knight? Jack's like it.
There's no jack in the tarot.
No, just poker.
You don't even play poker.
But anyways, yeah, there's definitely some kind of like, I think maybe a lot of men have this searching phase of like going out and then wandering and adventuring and figuring out who you are. You're not quite a boy, that you're not quite a man, kind of thing. Yeah. I think initiation is like a big part of that too, of like having an experience of having to step into, because a lot of guys I talk to really only start to embody that largest part like when they have a kid, or when they're really like something kind of forces you to step out of that comfort zone, like in a lot of ways, and kind of grow up.
What do you think that was for you?
Well, I don't know if I'm really like a king.
And yet you started to work with the energy a lot more in recent years.
Yeah. I mean, I think your fall for sure. Like that definitely made me, have to step up and take care of somebody in a way I've never had to before. And, I think there's like a lot of things. I think definitely being a therapist, like I was very cocky about being a therapist before I was actually a therapist. And Casey, you like to, you would gently push back on that, but I think there's like, I'm looking for there's some sort of quote, but it's like, anyways, it's like the less you know, the more confident you are about what you know, and the more you know that you don't know. So I think that fully stepping into like being a therapist and being a partner, and this stage of my life has just made me realize how much I still don't know. Forgot where I was going with that.
No, I think that makes sense. And maybe that's part of what you have to let go of to move from boy to king, is letting go of this idea of knowing.
Yeah.
Like there's this piece of like, I know so much. That is actually naivete.
Yeah. Well, I really love like the beginner's mind in Zen, like the fact that you're always like the moment that you've been like, I've got it. I've reached the peak. I know everything. That's when you actually have a blind spot, and maybe like the king is like the only way to actually sit in that is to not be so caught up in what that means. Because if you're like, oh, I'm a king, blah, 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 like, look at me, I'm going to pound my chest. Like, you're not really like being a king. It's like kind of the greatest leaders lead from the back, like empower people and don't need to be in the spotlight.
So we're getting into my next question, which really is like, what does the king archetype actually mean to you? And what do you think about embodying king energy? And I know you don't do it all the time yet. And I'm not in queen all the time. I mean, I think we talk about, for those that are on more of a feminine spiral journey, I talk about the maiden to mother spiral a lot, and that the queen is kind of this almost piece between mother and crone, but it's not really dependent on age. It's more of a sovereignty claiming that you come back to again and again. But you don't necessarily stay there because you're always in this spiral. You're always in this shedding. Yeah. And so I relate to not always being in that archetype all the time. But when you have felt that in yourself, what is it? Like, what does that actually feel like?
So something makes me think of, I remember like my cousin used to be like this big kind of frat bro, and I just kind of had this like persona and this vibe that I butted heads with a lot. And, it was interesting. He really, like, when he had a kid, I asked him like, what's been kind of like, it was a totally different person after he got married and had a kid. And I was like, what's like the biggest like change you've experienced in your life, like having a kid? And he was like, I felt like for so long, like my life, like I was the center of my life. Like I was the most important thing in my life. And, maybe that was fine for where I was at, but all of a sudden it's like my life's about her, like my daughter. And so I guess like King's about like service. Like, I think like those times when I'm showing up fully or I'm not thinking about myself. And I'm like, how do I serve other people or how do I be supportive? And I'm not so caught up in what I need.
Well, and I think that relates to being a therapist too, right? You're training to be a therapist, and in therapy, the therapist holds the container. You witness the client, you're in service, right? Of creating safety. You're doing your best to try not to fix them.
No. I fix people all the time.
You fix people?
I shared this kid's trauma. I told you the other day, I fixed this kid's trauma.
Yeah, you just fixed it.
I actually fixed it. You don't fix your client's trauma?
Not generally.
Oh, well,
No.
I don't know what they're taught you on Europa, but... Okay, what was your question again? My ADHD is really
It's okay, I might just edit all of that out.
No, I think it's cute.
What was my question? Right, like, what does it mean to be the witness?
Well, something one of my professors said is that, like, as soon as you let go of trying to fix someone's problems, that generally fixes their problems. But it's like it's like kind of this paradox of like, people are coming in for specific problems and hopefully getting some relief from them. Otherwise, like, there'd be no point in seeing a therapist. But the irony is, like, the more that I have a preconception or I try and control the situation, or even that I'm doing it for myself, like that I'm like, oh, I need to fix this person for to feel good about myself, then I'm not as effective as a therapist. I'm not listening. I'm not present. It becomes about me and not them. And I guess kind of the irony is the more that you step back and that you allow the space to unfold and you just give them space to heal, like that's when they tend to move. And, maybe that does fix them. I don't know.
So it's the witness. It's being the witness and holding the container that allows people to self-heal.
Yeah.
And that's king energy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Totally.
And outside of therapy, what does king energy mean in your daily life for you? With friends, with yourself, with how you move through the world?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's like, I'm starting like a men's group, and I think, yeah, it's like I'm really trying to like make it a space like where, I mean, I'm the one that's starting it, obviously, but I'm trying to make it a space that everyone feels like they have ownership over. And so I think it can be really like, I'm noticing it can be really easy to just make executive decisions and be like, we're just doing this. This is how this is going to work, or this is what I have planned. But I think in order for it to be really powerful, like I want everyone to take ownership of the group. And so like, I start with being like, does anyone want to lead a mindfulness activity, or asking like if other people want to facilitate, or before making big decisions, having a group vote. And I think there's a bit of putting your ego to the back burner and being like, what's in the highest interest of the group, rather than just me being like the center of attention. So that's like something I've had to learn, is like, how does my whole life not be about just me? And not that like I don't matter or my needs don't matter, but I think sometimes it could be really lonely to just think about yourself all the time. And I think I'm learning how to, really put other people's needs first. And in our relationship too, I think I'm doing my best to acknowledge when I've been a butt and I've been mean, or to be more supportive. And I think just traditionally I really struggled with being nurturing, and maybe that was like from my dad or whatever, but I think I'm learning how to be a more like nurturing person.
You're really speaking to your Saturn return right now.
Yeah.
At least that's how I see it.
I feel like I need a Bernedoodle to become a king.
You need a Bernedoodle?
It's going to make me a king.
When we have the dog.
We'll ride him into battle. Cyrus the Bernedoodle.
We're going to get a Bernedoodle at some point. We are likely going to name him Cyrus after Osiris. But I want to talk about your South to North node a little bit. And you're an astrology skeptic, which I respect. But it really does seem to parallel your journey. And your North and South node is exactly this moon axis. So this moon axis, like I said in the beginning, is the Aries to Libra axis. And your South node is in your first house in Aries. That's also where your Saturn return is happening, is in first house Aries. Conjunct your South node, which is about maturing your independence. And because your North node's in Libra in the 7th house, which is relationship collaboration, all of that is in service of partnership. So there's really this tension that your journey is holding between independence and partnership, between the warrior who goes it alone and the king who can be sovereign and in relationship. And so whether you call it North-South node soul path or part of your Saturn return or not, you're really in this journey right now of learning to embody the king. And I'm curious if there's any more you want to say about what that journey has taught you about the tension between independence and partnership.
Yeah, I think like my biggest fear of relationship was like feeling like trapped, right? And like that I won't have my life anymore and I won't have my freedom. I think it's maybe recognizing that like I can still have my freedom in relationship. I definitely like in the past I've had a lot of codependent relationships and just moments when I really lost who I was. But I think that like a true partnership, it's like you encourage each other's freedom and still honor like your commitments to each other in your life. And I think that's something we were really learning how to do. But I think, recognizing it, like, sacrificing, like, I guess for so much of my life, I felt like freedom was having every option open. Like, oh, I can go live in a van in Uruguay, or I can go, and recognizing like, sometimes freedom is also the choice to deepen with somebody. And I think sometimes I think I'm happier than I would have expected having, a stable relationship and a stable life and deepening into that. But also like recognizing that like it's kind of like you have your coven and I'm building a men's group and we're both really like I'm in another men's group and we're both really like it's important for us to have our own friendships and not just be the center of each other's lives. So yeah, I think that like a healthy relationship is about that interplay, right? Of how do we come together and how can we still have our own lives independent of each other and support each other in that.
And what would you say to other men who are trying to embody king energy? Or to people in relationship with men who are on this journey?
Well, I feel like it's not about trying to embody king energy. Like, the more you're just authentically giving and you're leading from a place of service. I guess that would be like the biggest thing I could say is like leading from a place of service. Like, how can you be about the results of your labor? How can you be about like what you want to see in the world versus like what it will get from you? And so I think choosing to live from your passion and trusting that that's okay. Like, I love being a therapist and I love, helping people, find community and connection. And as long as I'm living from that authentically, rather than trying to force it, I think that's when I'm like the most king. It's like I'm the most king when I forget that I'm a king, you know, or stop trying to be one.
So I want to thank you, Matt, for learning to reach toward me, for holding steady and learning to hold steady throughout all my cycles and my tides, and for continuing to choose to grow, to extend, to lean into king energy, even when it's uncomfortable. All right.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, honey. Before I let you go, this week is a little different on the feed, and I want to name that. You might have noticed that I'm releasing 2 companion episodes this week, a decision made after recording the majority of this episode. This one on the king archetype and the sacred masculine, and a second episode is dropping alongside it on Aphrodite, the goddess who is Venus, whose week this is quite literally made for, with Venus moving into Taurus, that's her home sign, and the full moon in Libra on Wednesday. They belong together, these episodes, not as 2 halves of the same thing, but as a conversation between the masculine container and the sacred feminine force that moves within it. The king who can witness and hold space, and Aphrodite, the desire, the longing, the love that actually needs that container to be held. This week's astrology is asking us to understand both. And this decision, I also want to be transparent about something related to this decision, and that's that there's an extended version of this episode. The conversation that Matt and I continued after this public version ended. The places where it got more tender, more personal, more vulnerable than what you heard here. And that extended version is dropping this week exclusively for new moon and full moon initiates on Patreon. So if you're already there, thank you. It's yours. And if you've been thinking about joining, this week feels like a meaningful week to do it. The link is in the description. And to everyone who listened to this episode, whether or not Patreon is accessible for you right now, thank you. Genuinely. What you heard today still felt vulnerable to share, and I'm glad I chose to give that vulnerability to you. Ratings follows sharing the show with someone who needs it. That is how this reaches people who are looking for exactly this conversation. So for every one of you who's been there, who's supporting, who's listening, this episode was released for you. The vulnerability of this had me going back and forth on whether or not to release it. And your support matters more than I know how to say. So this is my gift. Okay. Blessed be. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Trust the spiral. This podcast offers spiritual and psychological education and priestess wisdom. This is not therapy, counseling, or mental health treatment. If you need mental health support, please contact a licensed provider and in a mental health emergency in the US, call 988.